Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 36 years old, and until last year, I honestly believed my parents would eventually learn to love my daughter. I know that sounds naive. Looking back now, I can see all the warning signs, the excuses, the comments, the uncomfortable silences, the way they treated her differently from the very beginning. But when the people hurting your child are your own parents, it's surprisingly easy to keep hoping they'll change. What happened last year destroyed that hope forever. And if you've ever tried to protect your child from people who were supposed to love them, then you probably already know where this story is going. What I didn't know at the time was that 1 year later, those same people would be standing outside my front door crying. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why, I need to start much earlier. I grew up in a small town where everybody knew everybody. My parents were respected. My father owned a hardware store. My mother taught elementary school. To outsiders, they looked like wonderful people, the kind of couple everyone admired. At home, things were different. Everything revolved around appearances, what neighbors thought, what church members thought, what relatives thought. My parents cared more about being respected than being kind. As a kid, I didn't realize how unhealthy that was. I thought every family worked that way. Then I moved away for college, and that's where I met Marcus. Marcus was funny, patient, brilliant. The kind of man who made every room feel warmer when he walked into it. We became friends first, then best friends, then something more. When I brought him home for Thanksgiving, my parents were polite, almost too polite. My mother smiled so hard her face looked painful. My father barely spoke. The moment Marcus left, everything changed. My mother asked, "Is this serious?" I said yes. My father stared at me for several seconds. Then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "You can do better." I asked what he meant. He refused to answer. He didn't have to. I already knew. That was the first time I understood something ugly about my parents, something they'd spent years hiding. For the next 3 years, they fought our relationship constantly. Nothing Marcus did was good enough. His career wasn't good enough. His family wasn't good enough. His personality wasn't good enough. Every criticism came wrapped in fake concern. Every insult disguised itself as advice. And if you've dealt with people like that, you know exactly how exhausting it is. When Marcus proposed, my parents didn't congratulate us. My mother cried, actual tears, like someone had died. That should have been enough for me to walk away. Instead, I kept trying. Because they're your parents, right? You spend your whole life wanting their approval, even when you know you'll never get it. We got married anyway. Marcus handled everything with more grace than I ever could. He never yelled, never argued, never insulted them back. Sometimes I think that made them hate him even more, because he refused to become the villain they wanted. 2 years later, our daughter Ava was born, and for a brief moment, I thought everything might change. I thought becoming grandparents would soften them. I thought seeing an innocent little girl would make them let go of whatever prejudice they'd been carrying for decades. I was wrong. Very wrong. At first, it was subtle. They bought gifts for their other grandchildren, not Ava. They remembered birthdays, not Ava's. Family photos somehow never included her. Every incident had an excuse. Every excuse sounded reasonable. Until you noticed it kept happening. Again, and again, and again. Marcus saw it before I did. One night he asked me a question that made my stomach drop. He said, "If strangers treated Ava this way, would you still be making excuses for them?" I didn't answer, because I knew the answer. No, I wouldn't. Ava was 6 when she first noticed. She asked why Grandma hugged her cousins longer. She asked why Grandpa never came to her soccer games. She asked why nobody displayed her school pictures. Try explaining racism to a 6-year-old. Try explaining that sometimes adults hate things children can't control. I couldn't do it, so I lied. I told her Grandma and Grandpa were just busy. I still hate myself for that. By the time Ava turned 8, things had become impossible to ignore. My parents barely interacted with her. When they did, it felt forced, cold, uncomfortable. But the event that changed everything happened during my nephew's birthday party. A normal Saturday afternoon. At least, that's how it started. The entire family was there, kids running around, adults talking, music playing, the usual chaos. Ava was wearing a yellow dress she'd picked herself. She loved that dress. She told everyone it made her look like sunshine. About an hour into the party, several kids started playing near the backyard pool. Nothing dangerous, just children being children. Ava accidentally bumped into one of her cousins. The cousin stumbled and started crying. No injury, no blood, just normal kid stuff. But my mother exploded, and when I say exploded, I mean instantly. 1 second she was talking, the next she was screaming. She stormed across the yard, grabbed Ava by the arm, and slapped her. Hard. The entire party froze. Everything went silent. I can still hear that silence. Ava looked shocked, not crying, just confused. Then my father said the words that changed our family forever. He pointed at my daughter and said, "That ugly black kid is always causing problems." Silence. Complete silence. For a second, I genuinely thought I'd imagined it. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Ava started crying, and something inside me broke. I ran across the yard, pulled my daughter away, and asked him what he had just said. My father didn't apologize, didn't look ashamed, didn't back down. He repeated it, like he was proud, like he'd finally said what he'd been thinking all along. I wish I could tell you I stayed calm. I didn't. I completely lost it. Years of excuses, years of denial, years of pretending things would improve. All of it came crashing down at once. I screamed. Marcus screamed. Relatives started arguing. Kids were crying. The birthday party turned into absolute chaos. My mother kept insisting Ava needed discipline, as though slapping someone else's child was normal, as though racism was somehow acceptable. And here's the part that hurt almost as much as their behavior. Some relatives stayed quiet. Some just watched. People I'd known my entire life. People who knew it was wrong. People who said nothing. If you've ever been betrayed, you know silence can hurt almost as much as cruelty. We left immediately. Ava cried the entire drive home. Then she asked a question that shattered me. She said, "Mom, am I ugly?" I nearly had to pull the car over, because no child should ever ask that question, especially because of their grandparents. Marcus and I spent hours comforting her, telling her she was beautiful, smart, kind, loved. But damage like that doesn't disappear overnight. Words matter, especially when they come from family. That night we blocked my parents everywhere. Phone, social media, email, everything. And for the first time in my life, I stopped trying. No more excuses, no more second chances, no more hoping. We were done. The next few months were harder than I expected. Not because I missed my parents, because I was grieving the parents I wished I'd had. That's something people don't talk about enough. Sometimes you're not mourning who someone was, you're mourning who they never became. Ava started therapy. Honestly, it helped all of us. She learned how to process what happened. Marcus and I learned how much pain she'd been hiding. Apparently, she'd noticed the favoritism years earlier, much earlier. She simply didn't want to upset us. Imagine carrying that at 8 years old. Meanwhile, my parents launched a campaign to rewrite history. Relatives started calling. Friends started messaging. Apparently, my parents were telling everyone we'd overreacted, that Ava was disrespectful, that Marcus had manipulated me, the usual nonsense. At one point, my mother actually claimed she never slapped Ava. despite 20 witnesses seeing it happen. If you've dealt with narcissists, you already know the pattern. Nothing is ever their fault. Reality becomes optional. Months passed. Then, something unexpected happened. Ava discovered painting, and I mean really discovered it. She became obsessed. Every spare minute went into art. At first, it was simple kid stuff, flowers, animals, cartoons. Then she started creating things that genuinely shocked people, not because she was 8, because she was talented, really talented. Teachers noticed, local artists noticed, everyone noticed. For the first time since the incident, she seemed genuinely happy, confident, excited. Watching her rebuild herself felt incredible. Then came the turning point. About a year after the birthday party, Ava entered a statewide youth art competition. Thousands of entries. We assumed it would just be a fun experience, a learning opportunity, nothing more. Then we got a phone call. Ava had won. Not her age group, the entire competition. I remember staring at the phone in disbelief. Marcus thought I was joking. Ava screamed so loudly the neighbors probably heard. Suddenly newspapers wanted interviews. Local television stations wanted stories. Her artwork started appearing everywhere. People were fascinated by this confident little girl with extraordinary talent. And that's when my parents reappeared. Funny how that works, isn't it? A year of silence. A year of ignoring her. A year without a single apology. Then suddenly, they wanted contact. At first it was letters, then emails, then messages through relatives. My mother claimed she missed her granddaughter. My father claimed family should stay together. Neither one mentioned the slap. Neither one mentioned the racist comment. Neither one apologized, not once. Instead, they focused on themselves, their pain, their suffering, their embarrassment. Classic. Then things got worse. One afternoon, a local news station aired a feature about Ava. The story spread online. Friends shared it, schools shared it, community groups shared it, and somehow my parents found a way to make it about themselves. My mother started commenting everywhere, claiming she was Ava's proud grandmother, posting childhood photos, acting supportive, pretending none of the previous year had happened. I couldn't believe it. The audacity was unbelievable. People who knew the truth were furious, but my parents didn't care. They wanted credit, recognition, association. They wanted the successful version of Ava, just not the little girl they had humiliated. Then came the phone call, the one I'll never forget. My father called from an unfamiliar number. I almost hung up. Almost. Instead, I listened. He spent 10 minutes talking about family, legacy, forgiveness, respect. Finally, I interrupted him. I asked one question. Had he called to apologize? Silence. A long silence. Then he said something incredible. He said, "We're the grandparents. We shouldn't have to apologize to children." That was it. That was the moment I knew nothing had changed. Not really. They weren't sorry. They were embarrassed. There's a difference. A huge difference. A few weeks later, fate delivered one final twist. Ava's school organized an art exhibition. Parents, teachers, media, everyone attended. The event was packed, and somehow my parents showed up. Nobody invited them. They just appeared. I saw them the second they walked inside. My stomach dropped. Marcus looked ready to throw them out himself, but before either of us could react, Ava noticed them. The room suddenly felt very small, very quiet. My mother started crying immediately. Real tears. At least I think they were real. She walked toward Ava, said she loved her, said she missed her, said grandparents make mistakes. The entire room was watching. And honestly, I didn't know what Ava would do. She was 9 by then, still a child, but she'd been through a lot. Then she said something I'll remember for the rest of my life. She looked directly at them and said, "You only like me now because other people do. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Even my father looked stunned. Then she continued, and this absolutely destroyed me. She said, "When nobody was watching, you called me ugly." Pause. "When nobody was watching, Mom and Dad loved me anyway." Another pause. "So I think I'll stay with the people who loved me first." I swear half the room started crying, including me, including Marcus. Even some teachers were wiping their eyes. My parents just stood there, speechless. For the first time, they had no excuse, no argument, no way to rewrite reality, because the truth had come from the child they hurt. Eventually, they left, quietly. Nobody stopped them. Nobody followed them. And that was the last time we saw them. It's been almost a year since then. Ava is thriving. Her artwork continues to amaze people. She's confident, happy, strong. Not because of what happened, because she survived it. As for my parents, I hear things occasionally through relatives. Apparently they're angry. Apparently they think we've turned Ava against them. Apparently they still believe they're the victims. Some people never change. And honestly, I've made peace with that. The hardest lesson I learned through all of this is that love isn't automatic. Being related to someone doesn't guarantee kindness. It doesn't guarantee respect. And it definitely doesn't guarantee access to your children. People earn that access, or they lose it. If you've made it this far, let me ask you something. Would you have given them another chance? Because even now, some relatives think I should. Some people think family deserves endless forgiveness. I don't. Not when children are involved. Not when racism is involved. Not when the people responsible refuse to take accountability. Maybe that sounds harsh, but every time I question myself, I remember that little girl sitting in the back seat asking if she was ugly. And then I remember that same little girl standing in front of an entire room and refusing to let anyone define her worth. That's when I know we made the right choice. Because the best revenge wasn't punishment. It wasn't humiliation. It wasn't karma. It was watching the child they tried to tear down become someone extraordinary, and knowing they no longer get to be part of that story. That's something they'll have to live with for the rest of their lives. And honestly, I think that's punishment enough.